Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CC podcast, the podcast where I yap and play video games for the enjoyment of my girlfriend. Today, I'm probably going to just keep on playing Street Fighter 6. I have found my love for the game again. So I'm going to just keep on doing this until I should probably buy a new game soon since it's been a while since I played a new game. Don't want to be one of those people that does not play new games. So probably going to do that soon. So yeah, maybe next episode will be a different game. But I want to talk a little bit about men, right? Big topic, men. And I want to, discuss them. Um, so starting off, when I was an undergrad, I took this criminology class, and criminology is essentially the study of why people commit crimes, right? This why what causes people to commit crimes. And mainly it's focused on violent crimes because those are the crimes that, you know, are pretty universally agreed are bad, right? Your rapes, your murders, your robberies, those kinds of things, your kidnappings. Those are the things that people generally agree are bad. Those other things, white collar stuff, those kinds of things, those are crimes that, there's a little bit more debate on, right? Is this really a issue or is it just the government being in people's business too much? That's a lot of that's a lot of the thing. But when we get into actual violent crimes, things that are truly described as antisocial behavior, why do people do those things, right? And so we spent a lot of time going through the different theories and everything. And when you're 18, 19, that kind of thing, 20, you're like, oh yeah, I can like figure out this like topic about human nature that uh no one has figured out before, because you're dumb and you have a high inflated sense of self at that time. And so one of the things uh, is what I would do, what I thought was, a pretty good unifying theory, right? Was there was, the simple formulation of crime, which is crime equals motive plus opportunity. If you are motivated to commit it and you have the opportunity, you will commit that crime. And then strain theory, right? So people that are under high strain, they have more motive, right? So people that are in poverty, they have more motivation to commit crimes because they believe that those crimes will help them achieve economic security, right? And then we're talking about people that have abundance, right? Low strain, people that have even more than what they need. That's when you have more of an opportunity, right, to commit crime. That's when we get into big topic right now, the Epstein class. The Epstein class, they have so much opportunity, they have so much wealth that they have the opportunity to commit these crimes that none of us would even be able to commit, right? None of us, most of us will live and die without even having the opportunity or even the option of participating in a child sex trafficking ring, right? And that's a good thing. But the people that have that, they do have that opportunity, and because they're motivated to do it, they committed those crimes, right? And so I think generally speaking, people would say that that is a pretty universal or a pretty uh encompassing theory of crime, right? It makes sense. Motive plus opportunity, and what those things fluctuate depending on your economic circumstances, right? But then at the end of the semester, our professor sits us down and they're like, well, but what about women? And it's kind of crazy, right? You go this entire semester thinking through human behavior, and you realize right at the end that thoughts, and like none of the thoughts of any of the theorists that you were reading about included women, right? None of why is there a gender gap in crime statistics, right? Why do women in the same circumstances as men not commit the same crimes as men, right? Even, women that are just as impoverished are as their male counterparts are less likely to rob someone, right? Those kinds of things. And so um when we look at that, it's like, okay, what what is that gender gap, right? Um and so this is not a video about criminology. This is not going to be me trying to explain that gender gap. What I really wanted to get at with that little anecdote in the beginning is explaining that social theories, right? Whenever we theorize and talk about social issues and social behaviors, they need to account for the other half of the population. I think part of the consequence of, living in a patriarchal society and a male dominated society, right? Men are centered, right, in these conversations about human behavior. And people fail to think about there's an entire half of the population that we're not addressing here, right? And so looking at what I really want to talk about is, you know, the other aspect of antisocial behavior, the aspect that is not necessarily criminal, um, being a loser, right? So the issue is a lot of young men, an increasing number, a number that is increasing every day, a lot of young men are losers. And by and I've talked about this in other videos, but just to redefine what I'm talking about, what I'm saying is, as a loser, is someone that doesn't have or value social connections, um, right? Doesn't value or have or value a community, right? And so this big topic about like why are young men losers, right? Why is this happening? And a lot of people's theories are they're just spending too much time online, right? They're just spending too much time online. And because of that, they're becoming losers, right? And the issue with that is that this does not seem to be true with women, right? Obviously, both genders are experiencing loneliness, a loneliness epidemic, but one group of people is appears to still be trying, and the other group is saying that they are fine just not trying and just having AI girlfriends replace human connection, right? And so I would say that, while both genders are becoming more lonely due to the society that we've created, one has one has subjected themselves to loserdom, and that is men, right? And men and women both have access to the internet, so why aren't women becoming losers? That's something whenever anyone talks about this issue, it needs to be addressed, right? There needs to be an explanation for that, right? Um, and so just looking at it, right? What does what does seem to happen to women that spend too much time online, right? What is the big issue that we ascribe to women that spend too much time online? I would say in my experience, my uh limited experience and everything, I would say that women that spend too much time on the internet more likely to have eating disorders. Same way men that spend too much time on the internet are more likely to be losers. Women are more likely to have eating disorders. And men that spend too much time on the internet are not more likely to have eating disorders, right? So men are becoming losers. Women are developing eating disorders, right? Or at the very least, body dysmorphia in terms of women. So like why is it different for men and women? And I think what is happening here is that the internet essentially hyper socializes us, right? Socialization is the process of how we learn how to act in society, right? Through our parents, in the media, and that kind of thing. When people talk about nature versus nurture, the nurture part, that's socialization, how people learn how to act and everything. And the internet, I think it hyper socializes us because it's socialization without counter messaging of reality, right? Um, so looking at that, we look at women, right? And they are socialized into believing that their social value comes from their appearance. And we socialize them into not feeling that like their appearance and beauty is good enough so that they will become dependent on male validation, and also that they will subscribe to economic factors to fuel the beauty industry, right? That's what we do with women. And when we when they go on the internet, it makes them believe that more, right? They feel more ugly. They are exposed to more uh, images that show them what they quote unquote should look like. In reality, right? They are perfectly normal and attractive looking women, but they're not in reality, right? They're online. If they stepped outside and touched grass and spoke to people, people would be able to assure them that they look perfectly fine. But they don't. They're not getting the counter messaging of what reality is, and so of they're not getting counter messaging of that socialization from reality, and so because of that, they are uh, just accepting what it is that society wants them to believe, right? I think part of everybody's journey towards who they become is this messaging and counter messaging, right? You learn something from your parents, you go to school, someone else learns something else from their parents, you guys talk about it and you synthesize that into what you want to do for the rest of your life, right? And that develops your thought processes, right? That's like something that that's essentially like how we grow as people, right? But we need that counter messaging. Otherwise, it'd be like if you grew up in your parents' house the entire time and never was exposed to the outside world, and you just were socialized by your parents, and like how we all know that that would turn you into a freak, and you would be hyper into that your parents' belief system, right? Same thing with the internet, with women. If they are women that spend too much time online are not getting counter messaging, and so they're only getting the messaging from society. um they're turning into freaks that believe that they have um some kind of issue with their attractiveness. They develop body dysmorphia, they develop eating disorders. That is what the internet does to people, right? And by freak, I just mean like someone that is, antisocial, does not have the tools that they should have as a fully functioning adult. And so that's what it is for women. So what is it for men, right? And what do we socialize men into being in this society? And what is the internet hyper socializing men into being? And I would say that, I the a pretty unifying thing that a lot of the talk about what men should be is this what I would call like an archetypal war hero, right? Someone that is, uh, this like mythical war hero that's willing to like fight and die, right? And so look at the aspects of this like war hero, right? They have to have, of course, this willingness to kill, and to be these soldiers, right? We want men to grow up to be soldiers. And a soldier has to be willing to kill, and that in order to do that, you have to be able to kill some of your empathy, right? That's just how it is. If you are somebody that is willing to kill someone, you have to be able to no longer empathize with that person. And so part of our socialization of men is to make them less empathetic than women so that they can become soldiers if need be. Additionally, they have to have this willingness to die, right? A war hero needs to be willing to die. And I think that that portrays itself in the unhealthy way that men think about and care for their bodies. You know, when you compare men and women, people like to joke about this, but it's true. Women care about their health more, right? They have these skincare routines. They care about their diets more. They live longer. They care more about their safety, because men are socialized into not being too like hung up on their body, right? They're not too attached to it, willing to sacrifice it for what they believe is worth it, right? Um, and just the simple things, right? My girlfriend, she will sometimes be like, I can't eat certain things because it'll make me break out. I don't know what will make me break out if I eat it. I literally do not like chart and catalog those things. I could not answer that question. And just that simple like divide, right? I do care about my like health and appearance, right? I maintain a diet and I like have a skincare routine, like all that kind of stuff. And unlike other men, I wash my ass. But in terms of but still, I would say that like my girlfriend definitely cares about her health more than I care about my health. Um, and that I think that's just a thing that is like generally true across the board. And I think the reason for that is because men are socialized into not being precious about their own bodies because you might have to die someday, right? For a cause. Um, and additionally, right, when we talk about health, at the end of the day, being antisocial is unhealthy, right? And women, we talk about uh this like loser epidemic, right? Women care about being social more than men do. Men at least acts like they're fine, just being in their room and gooning and having AI girlfriends and just playing video games all day. That's what they act like they are willing to do, but women care about socialization more because and being social is an important aspect of a person's health. We are social animals, right? Um and then we get to you know, the last aspect, I think one of the most important aspects, the reason why I titled this video what I titled it is that you know, not only is this war hero supposed to be willing to kill and die, but they also have to be subservient in some way, right? Um, there's this war hero has a commander or a higher power or a god or a belief or something that they are willing to fight and kill for, right? And they're willing to go this mile and like follow this uh higher power for whatever reason, right? So when you're a kid, that starts with, your father telling you what to do. You are raised under your father. That's how a lot of conservatives believe that it should be, this, submission to a father figure. You look at the Bible, right? One of the cornerstones of modern the modern Western world, in terms of its philosophies and stuff like that. And people like to focus on the first part of this, but I think the second part is interesting. Um, there's a verse that says wives should submit to their husbands, but husbands have to submit to God, right? you there is no man that is not supposed to be submitting to some kind of higher power, right? Or to another male figure, another more powerful male figure, another leader, right? And that's where a lot of when we get to why a lot of men fall into this like love of authoritarianism, right? I think because it's this submission to a big leader, to a powerful leader, right? I think that that plays into that. And then we get into right, we see that we see this like submission to a big leader, a powerful leader when we saw with the 2024 election when Trump won the election. Somebody, I forget who it was, but he was like, yeah, daddy's home. He said that on TV. And it's like, why would he say that? Why would he equate Donald Trump to someone's father and specifically say daddy? And it's one of those weird things where it's like people, the submission to a father is synonymous to submission to a higher power, authority figure, right? Whether that be a father, a god, or a dictator, right? That's what men are trained to listen to. And this submission has to come out of fear, right? And so um a leader, to a lot of men, men are socialized into believing that a leader should be fear inducing, right? Again, when I was watching that Jack Saint video about fatherhood, um, they talked about how fathers should be able to scare children, should be scaring their children into submitting to them, right? The reason why single mothers can't raise sons is because at a certain point, a teenage boy is going to be bigger than his mother, more likely than not. And so he won't be scared of her anymore. And so why would he listen to her, right? Uh, the father needs to be in the home in order to scare the child into submission. That's what these conservatives that are obsessed with traditional masculinity believe, right? Addition, and again, when we talk about authoritarians, these big, powerful leaders, we it's not that we want big leaders that are able to do the bestest thing for everyone, right? We want big, strong military leaders that are able to win big battles and like fight big wars and submit and crush their enemies, that kind of thing. That's what men are trained to look for out of leaders, right? And that's why they often do support authoritarians more than women. And I think that this support of authoritarians goes back into, not only uh, the male support of Donald Trump currently, but also people supporting bosses and being anti-labor, right? They believe that you should be scared of your boss. You should be someone that is worried that your boss can abuse you and fire you for whatever reason, and just has the right to take advantage of you, right? They believe that that is good, right? And they believe that because that's what a leader is to them. That's what men are taught a leader is: someone that induces fear in the people that they rule over. um and that's when we also get into a lot of the issue with men and women, right? There the issues that a lot of men and women have. A lot of men, they believe, women aren't doing what they want. Women aren't respecting them because the women don't fear them, right? Again, women, a wife should submit to her husband, right? And if your wife isn't submitting to you, It's because you're not being a powerful enough leader. And a powerful leader is one that induces fear. So what you have to do to these men is you have to inflict violence on the woman to instill that fear, right? Um and so due to that, right, we have created like archetypal man, what society has decided to create um with this idea of this archetypal hero, right, is essentially we this ideal man in Western society is this antisocial, unhealthy loser that wants to submit themselves to the Epstein class, right? The elites in society. And then the internet makes that happen faster. Um, because the internet, when you're on it, it shields you from reality, and it keeps you from realizing how stupid of an idea this is, right? How you look at men in your actual life and you realize that that is not the way to live, that's not the way to lead, that is not what you should be doing. You should not be submissive at all, right? Same way like women shouldn't, men shouldn't either. We should all be leaders of our own lives. But you won't realize that if you're on the internet all day, right? Did uh why did Epstein and Steve Bannon not decide to create neo Nazis just through small grassroots campaigns or whatever, right? Why did they decide to use an internet forum? Because the internet is perfect for getting those toxic ideas that are inside of men's head and amplifying them to the nth degree until they become Nazis, essentially. Like, because that's what they want. That an, until you are a authoritarian, right wing, far right loser, right? And when people talk about the internet, obviously I believe that disconnection from it does have its value, in terms of preventing this hyper socialization. And I think that you know I can only speak through, again, my limited perspective. This anecdote might be something that people look at as like, that's not true, that's not real. But when I was a child, um, back in like 2008 or whatever, it felt like men were becoming like free from this idea, right? This like horrible idea of what a man should be. This what's it called? What archetypal like war hero archetype. I remember back in like fourth grade, 2008. There was that whole campaign of like real men wear pink and everything, just like shattering that norm. That was the rise of like the metrosexual and that kind of thing, and like people like those kinds of guys were becoming more and more accepted in society. That kind of thing. That's my belief of how the world was when I was a child, right, in elementary school. Maybe that is wrong, but I feel like in the early 2000s, men were in the process of like becoming free from this like archetype. But then social media happened and it regressed us, right? It regressed us to being hyper socialized back into this stereotype. That's why, and I think that's why we're in a situation that we are now where we're arguing about things that should have been settled decades ago, right? Why are we still arguing about this? And it's because social media has regressed us by hyper socializing us and shielding us from reality. And so, yeah, I do believe it is important to acknowledge the harmful effects of prolonged internet use. But I think more important to acknowledge the larger issue, and that is what this entire thing is about: toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is this war hero archetype, this harmful archetype that men are sold. and taught to believe in. And because we have that, right? Because that is still seen as the ideal of men, that is what the internet is going to continue to push people towards. So there's like essentially only two options if we're going to like fix this masculinity problem that people keep talking about. It's either to disconnect all men from the internet, right? Which good luck, or to rebuild a new archetype that people can be that the internet can hyper socialize people into. And you know, it's one of those things where it's like which one sounds easier? I don't know. Both sound like incredibly difficult and daunting tasks, but I think that those are our two options, right? Because the internet is going to hyper socialize people into their ideal, right? And so either we change what the ideal is from this toxically masculine stereotype, or we stop people from this hyper socialization and we force them to engage with actual reality. Um and so yeah, I think that is the situation that we are in with men. That is the end of the video. If you are my girlfriend, then I love you. Please let me know what you think next time I see you. And if you're not my girlfriend, please like, comment, and subscribe, and try and make the world a better place. Thank you.